the one that they selected for you. And this was just going crazy. I was almost at the point of saying screw YouTube and going to place to start streaming. But I spent so much time here and trying to make this work, it just drove me nuts.
Rakawane takwarena gauri kora skarore wokan chata muscovi masi. What's going on, y'all? The Chief Spirit Wolf here once again to break down that good news for y'all. That good stuff I know y'all want to hear about why I left the Moorish Temple of America, part two. This right here is gonna be the big breakdown. After y'all hear this, y'all ain't gonna want to have nothing to do with nothing else no more. Y'all gonna understand because I'm gonna give y'all the concepts. I'm gonna break it down and I'm gonna show you how to think with this. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna guide you through this. All right. So get ready. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna have a recap on what happened last time on part one, and then we're just gonna jump right into the good stuff. All right. So we got a lot of stuff that we're about to get into. So hold your seat, get ready, turn your volume up, make your screen big, get ready to screenshot, all of that. Make sure you like and subscribe because this is for sure gonna change your life. All right. Always remember that I ain't make this up. I ain't giving you my opinion and all of that. I'm just giving you the receipts of the stuff my people pay for. Let's go. So, let's get our meditation music started. Okay, so remember the Berbers. We was going over the Berbers. Now check out this Berber right here. Look at his hat. Excuse me, not his hat, but the feather in his head. He got a bow and arrow, tattoos, Aboriginal style. Let's go. Amazigh, meaning the free people. That's what the Berbers call themselves, the Amazigh, meaning free people. And look at their script. They even have their own script, their own language. You see it right there? Have you ever seen that before? Okay, let's go. Tamazga. Tamazga is what they call the land. Tamazga. Not a Mexum, but Tamazga. Not Africa, but Tamazga. See their language, see the script. Let's go. And then remember, we talked about Rome, and then we talked about Mauritania, and then we talked about Numidia, and how Mauritania was founded by the Berbers, and Numidia was a confederation of the Berbers. And then we talked about the Ptolemy Empire. We talked about how Alexander the Greek came in there and he ransacked and tried to become a pharaoh, and that didn't work. And then after that, he left his general Ptolemy there, Ptolemy the First, Soter, who they also call Savior. Remember? Let's go. Oh, and then Sotar became Serapis, remember? And then Serapis is the guy that we know today as Jesus, because Serapis is nothing but a concoction of Osiris, right? And the bull Apis. So he got Osiris as his name. Then he wanted to be made a god, remember? We went over this already, class. Ah, the worshippers of Serapis. Here are called Christians. And those who are devoted to the god Serapis, call themselves bishops of Christ. In fact, it appears that some followers of Serapis were eventually expelled from Rome when in 19 AD Tiberius expelled the Jews, meaning that they were doing the same thing. Now, class, I know we went over it, but now let's go over some actual evidence so we don't point the finger at Chief Spirit Wolf. All right? Osara, Osiris, and the sacred bull of Memphis, Apis, and during the process came up with the name Osirapis, later Serapis. They then gave the name Osirapis to Ptolemy I and gave his image the assimilated characteristics of their ancient Egyptian ancestor Osiris, thereby making Ptolemy and his image a god. They later created a devotional ritual to Serapis. He was spoken of as the savior and leader of souls, leading souls to the light and receiving them again. The ritual goes on to say, he raises the dead. He will save us after death, and we will be protected in his providence. Let's go. Allow me to emphasize that it was our ancestors, the Coptic Melchite Egyptians, who created the image of Serapis. This, in effect, was to be used later to create the religion of Christianity by giving the Serapis icon image a human nature. Excuse me. Through Idiophysitic union, which was officially done at the Council of Ephesus in 431. After the Melchite Coptic Egyptian priests and priestesses in the Temple of Memphis, Egypt, fulfilled Ptolemy I's request and provided him an image of himself made into a god, man-made religion, not universal spiritual consciousness as practiced by the ancient Egyptians. It came into existence for the first time in human history. Attempted to put his man-made icon image of himself into all the sacred temples throughout Egypt alongside the ancient Egyptian god Osiris. This was his way of getting himself accepted into the ancient Egyptian priesthood. However, as previously mentioned, this devious scheme of Ptolemy's was rejected by the entire sacred priest society throughout Egypt except in Memphis, Egypt, where the name Serapis and icon image were created. Angered by this rejection, Ptolemy I Soter proceeded to close all other sacred ancient Egyptian temples throughout Egypt and made it against the law for any ancient Egyptian to build any temples or buildings for the purpose of spiritual fellowship. The closing down of their ancestors' sacred temples during the reign of Ptolemy I Soter completely eliminated the last of the pharaonic sacred institutions of ancient Egypt. This was the beginning of the erosion of the spiritual unity that the ancient Egyptian priesthood had tried to keep in place throughout Egypt during Egypt's occupation by the Greeks. The passing of this law forced the priests and priestesses to use their homes for spiritual purposes. The law stayed in effect until the time of the Roman ruler Justinian I, who in 543, along with his wife Theodora, financed and built the world's first Coptic Christian monophysite church in Syria today, called the Jacobite Church. Remember I was talking about Syria? This was the first place where they built this. This church was built and later named for Jacobite Baratus. aka James Baradai, the Coptic Egyptian quasi-monophysite Christian who was appointed by Theodora to evangelize among the European Arabs. From monophysite Christianity, the pagan religion of Mohammedanism, Islam was created. The Jacobite church followers only recognized the Osiris-like characteristics in the created image of the Serapis Christ icon and thereby did not accept or recognize a human nature in this man-created icon. What does this mean? This means that the Egyptian quasi-monophysite Christian Coptic priest who made the image of Serapis into a god later moved to Syria and founded their first temple, their first church later on. And the difference between them and the later Christians was that they only worshiped the Osiris image, the created image, but not Osiris in human form. Only the thought of it, the spirit of it, so to speak. So they worship the spirit of Serapis, but not Serapis, the created image of man, made in a man. Let's go. Subsequent to the closing of our ancestors' sacred temples throughout Egypt, Ptolemy I Soter confiscated all of their divine and sacred inspired writings, which were written on papyrus scrolls, and proceeded to store them in the one remaining temple in Memphis, Egypt. This was the temple where his image had been made into the pagan god Serapis. Every Ptolemy ruler and later Roman rulers of Egypt sat on a throne of Egypt and became the vicar of Serapis, just as the Roman Catholic Pope of today sits on the throne of Peter in the Vatican and passes himself off as the vicar of this created image called Jesus Christ. What? It was Ptolemy I, Soter's grandson, Ptolemy III, Euergetes I, who built the Serapeum Temple and annex building in Alexandria, Egypt in 240 BC. Today, this annex building is known in history as the Great Library of Egypt. This annex building became the Great Library of Egypt when Ptolemy III, Euergetes I, transferred the ancient Egyptian divine scrolls into this annex building after removing them from the old temple in Memphis, Egypt, where his grandfather Ptolemy I Soter previously stored them. Thus, the annex became the Great Library of Egypt. This refutes the lie that is told about Alexander the Greek building the Great Library of Egypt to house the supposed thousands of books of the fictitious Aristotle, his supposed teacher. Aristotle was deemed fictitious because the Greeks during the time of antiquity did not have an alphabet nor institutions. After removing the sacred scrolls from the old temple in Memphis, Egypt, Ptolemy III Euergetes first began to tear down the old temples. To make way for the new temple he was to erect in Memphis, Egypt, to honor Serapis, called the Dionysian Temple. Do your research on the Dionysian Temple. I already showed him that he was one of the 16 Jesuses before Jesus in the last video in part 1. As we go further, we will see the significance of the annex building in the development of the man-made pagan religion called Christianity. As you follow Serapis throughout the Greek occupation of Egypt, you will find another significant development in the creation of Christianity. At this time in history, 197-196 BC, the Melkite Coptics began to worship Serapis as a god and at the same time giving honor to Ptolemy V Epiphanes. Of Memphis, Egypt. This honor to Ptolemy V was created to celebrate the first commemoration of the coronation of Ptolemy V, the king of Egypt, and to give thanks for the many favors given to him to the Melkite priest society. The commemoration ceremony also established in history the religious ritual called the Eucharist. This ritual was also made part of Ptolemy V Epiphanes' title, which was Eucharistos. This honor, the Eucharistos, became the first order of service set aside in the religious temples that honored Serapis, such as the Dionysian Temple in Memphis, Egypt, the Serapeum in Alexandria, Egypt, and the Temple of Serapis in Canopus, as well as military installations throughout the land area ruled by the Ptolemies and later the Romans. This Eucharist bestowed upon Ptolemy V Epiphanes and Serapis is still being used today by the Roman Catholic Church in its opening ritual service called the Mass Communion Service. Come on now. Come on, y'all. The Roman Catholic Church, through its teachings of Christian theology, has deceived the world population by teaching the believer to believe that the ritual called the consecrated Eucharist, which was a ritual created by the Diophysitic Coptic Egyptian Christians, is the Lord's Last Supper, Serapis / Christ, surrounded by 12 other European images at a banquet table, supposedly eating the Last Supper. This Eucharist, as commemorated to Ptolemy V Epiphanes Eucharistos, and the image of Serapis has nothing to do with today's meaning of the consecrated Eucharist. The question has to be asked, how was the ritual originally used? During and after the commemoration to Ptolemy V Epiphanes and Serapis, the Greek occupants of Egypt gave recognition to Serapis and Ptolemy V Epiphanes by celebrating the Eucharist in their homes during the usual hour of dinner or late afternoon supper. To them, this was a time to be thankful and grateful to Serapis and Ptolemy V Epiphanes, the vicar of Serapis, for the many favors bestowed by Ptolemy V Epiphanes in the name of Serapis. To make way for this strong commemoration to Ptolemy V Epiphanes and Serapis, the Melchite Egyptian priesthood at Memphis removed all of the other remaining ancient Egyptian deities from the three temples honoring Serapis. This left only the Serapis icon / image to be worshipped. Okay, so they started taking over Africa, staying in Africa. Then later on, the old Syrian boys who took over Syria with Muawiyah, which I showed you last time, which got sent up there by Uthman to govern Syria from the Moorish tribe, had the Syrian Christians governors that he was listening to. Then he appointed, who did he appoint? Musa. And then Musa's father was the slave of the governor of Egypt, the Muslim governor of Egypt. And then he freed Musa's father. Musa's father's son was raised up. Then Musa went into Egypt to conquer Egypt. And then he ended up having a bunch of slaves. And then one of his slaves, look at this, was Tariq. And they're going over here in the name of Serapis because they only worship Serapis, the divine image, not Serapis made in the image of man like the Christians do with their Jesus. So they decided to go over here. I mean, look, this is an actual picture. So this means this stuff was still being carried on. The fact that you worship your ancient Aboriginal gods and you didn't worship the God of the Christian or the God of Islam or the God of the Jews, which was all outside of Africa, all outside of America. If you don't worship their Serapian image, then they're going to put you in jail. And it's been going on so long that our people actually think that that stuff is right because they think it's ancient, not even knowing where it really come from. So they think that they really protecting it. So this brother right here is really gonna hold his brother in chains because he think that they're idol worshippers, not knowing that he's the one that's really an idol worshiper. Shame. Look, this brother gonna cut his head because he's an idol worshiper, I guess. And look at this. I cut your face. I cut your neck because you don't worship my God. Sad. These brothers right here, Tangiers. Oh my cats, masters of slavery. Let's keep going. Then they hook up with the British Crown and what they want to do. They're just going to use you as their guards, like they always did, and use you so they can take over everything. So remember we was going over this. Look at this. Remember last class we went over ethnonym, and we was talking about the ethnonym means a national name, and it applied to ethnic groups, and exonyms were ethnonyms that was applied by outside groups given to another ethnic group, such as Negro, Black, Colored, African, American, Indian, red, brown people, white man. All of these are ethnonyms. And sometimes they give national ethnonyms as well, like Berbers. And you have autonyms and endonyms that are national names that are ethnonyms that the people accept for themselves, like the Aboriginals of emphasized men. and it was to make English in quality or characteristics, to adapt a foreign word, name, or phrase to English uses, such as names. Remember when we went over names? Remember we were showing how Morocco was actually an English name for the Almoravid capital called Marrakesh. But Marrakesh was just a capital. It was not a country. It was not a people. The people were Almoravid, and they were Amazigh who have an endonym for themselves called Berber. So let's look at the Moroccan tribes and see if there's a tribe named Morocco. We have the Abda tribe, the Al Rashida, the Ait Atta, the Ait Al Regal, the Aswafat, the Bini Amir, the Bini Ahsan, Bini Guil. We have the Bini Kraine, or Crane, or Bini Mosa, Bini Zamor, Shabma, Daukala, Haha, Bini Hassan, Hora, Hayana, Cloud, Cloud, Mahil, Masmura. North African tribes, Alut Zian, Rahamna, Regaga, Aulad Sidi Sheikh, Sles, Tajakant, Tamansna, Zaid. So, as we can see, there is no tribe in Morocco named Moor or Moroccan. Nobody in the country is named that. These are the names. They have tribes, just like we have them over here, and their tribes are their nations. And they have one big name that they go for to call themselves amongst each other called Amazigh. And I know some of you slick Moors is going to try to uh, go back to this right here and tell me that Beni Zamor means a Moor, because Beni means tribe and Zamor probably means the Moor, right? Okay, let's go. Beni Zamor is a Moroccan tribe of Halali Arab descent. It is part of the Talo Confederacy. It is of Arab descent. The Banu Halali was a confederation of tribes of Arabia from the Hejaz and Najd regions of the Arabian Peninsula that immigrated to North Africa in the 11th century. They are not from there. Masters of the vast plateau of Najd, they enjoyed a somewhat infamous reputation, possibly owing to the relatively late conversion to Islam and accounts of their campaigns in the borderlands between Iraq and where? Syria. With the revolutionary movement, the Cormatians and the Bahrain and Oman, they participated in the pillage of Mecca in 930 in their fight against the Fatimid Caliphate. When the later became masters of Egypt and the founders of Cairo in 969, they hastened to confine the unruly Bedouin in the south before sending them to the Maghreb as what? Slaves. And then remember, we went over this how there's so many flags that the Berbers go by in all of the countries, and they consider themselves as Berbers, and they have this Ya symbol in the middle, which represents free people or themselves. Then we saw her, and we see that they represent their Berber flag. And then we went over to Pedro Nino. We talked about Pedro Nino. Remember, class? How Pedro Nino and the Nino brothers. How Pedro allowed and gave his ship to Christopher Columbus to come over here, and his brothers also were captains of the ships. They had the Santa Maria, the Nina, and the Pinta, and his other brothers were captains as well, Jose and Francisco. Juan Francisco. And this was supposed to be a replica of one of the boats that they used. So, now let's go on, class. So now we leaving from over there and we coming from over here and we understanding that that was basically a slave European culture, and that's why people really couldn't survive with none of that type of stuff, because the Arabs came into Africa and enslaved Tariq and then sent Tariq up over there as a Muslim convert general for them into Spain, and then the Berbers went over there and conquered over there, and they was called Moors by the Europeans, not by themselves. But they went over there with the Islamic culture, which they were slaves to. Simple as that. So if you're bragging about all of that, you're really bragging about a slave culture. Let's get it right. They was forced on that. Just like a lot of our Christian brothers here in America was forced to go and fight for the American Christian wars. Yes? Yes. Okay, let's go. 1493, the Pope asserts rights to colonize and convert and enslave. Pope Alexander VI issues a papal bull or decree, inter cateria, in which he authorizes Spain and Portugal to colonize the Americas and its native peoples as subjects. He authorizes Spain and Portugal? Okay. To make us his subjects, asserts the rights of Spain and Portugal to colonize, convert, and enslave. It also justifies the enslavement of Africans. See that? They enslaving us and Africans. Get it right. Out of our own soul largeness and certain knowledge, and out of the fullness of our apostolic power, by the authority of Almighty God conferred upon us in blessed Peter, and of the vicarship of Jesus Christ. Remember that? Serapis, right? Which we hold on earth, do by tenor of these presents, should said island have been found, by your envoys and captains, give granted assigns to you and your heirs and successors, kings and castills, and Leons forever, together with all their dominions, cities, camps, places, and villages, and all rights, jurisdictions, and opportunities, and all islands and mainlands found and to be found discovered, and to be discovered towards the west and south by drawing and establishing a line from the Arctic pole, namely the north, to the Arctic pole, namely the south, no matter whether the said mainlands and islands are found and to be found in the direction of India or towards any other quarter. The said line to the south, no matter whether the said mainlands and islands are found to be found in the direction of India or towards any other quarter, the said line to be distant 100 leagues towards the west and south from any of the islands commonly known as the Azores or Cape Verde. With this proviso, however, that none of the islands and mainlands found and to be found discovered and to be discovered beyond that said line towards the west and south, being the actual possession of any Christian king or prince upon the birthday of our Lord Jesus Christ, just past, from which the present year 1493 begins. And we make a point and depute you and your said heirs and successors, lords of them, with full and free power, authority, and jurisdiction of every kind. So, this is the great papal bull and the DOD, doctrine of discovery, that everyone and all the Indians can't stand and hate. Find is supposed to be theirs. Ain't that something? So what did they find? Looked like the same thing they found when they went over in Asia. That's something. Oh, Pyramid of the Sun and Moon. Look how beautiful that is. That right there. Amazing. And then look at what they built when they left Egypt and went back to Greece and built the Leaning Tower of Pisa. A beautiful sight. Look at this. Look at the stuff that they see when they come over here. Leave the American Negro alone. He's been everywhere, and he definitely been here. It comes with the land. How you gonna go into the temples here, or how you even live over here in South America, and you have these temples here, and you got all these black people in here, but you don't say nothing, but you firmly bargain and make sale unto Elith, short her heirs, a boy of my Nacon named Weetopin, until the full term of his life, in consideration of a young horse, full age 1 year, Not only did Indians sell their war captives into slavery, but even sold their own children. 20th March 1712, will of Francis Marbury to wife Elizabeth, one Indian man named Robin and one Indian boy Jack, and a mulatto girl. 20 August 1712, inventory of the estate of Francis Marbury, two Indian slaves and one Indian mulatto. Girl first described as a mulatto, later described as an Indian mulatto. Come on, man. But right here we saying how an Indian gave his son up to slavery for a horse, bruh. For life. Let's go. Get these bars. The first American, to own slaves was a black man. Let's go. Anthony Johnson was an Angolan held as an indentured servant by a merchant in the colony of Virginia in 1620, but later freed to become a successful tobacco farmer and property owner. Later freed and became a successful tobacco and property owner. Notably, he was the first to hold a black African servant as a slave in the mainland American colonies. Upon his death in 1670, a court ruled that he was a Negro and by consequence an alien, and the colony seized his land. Buster. The first slave owner in America was not only a black man, he went to court and demanded it. In 1654, it was time for Anthony to release John Kaiser, a black indentured servant. Instead, Anthony told Kaiser he was extending his time. Kaiser left and became employed by the free white man Robert Parker. Anthony Johnson sued Robert Parker in the Northampton court in 1654. In 1655, the court ruled that Anthony Johnson could hold John Kaiser indefinitely. Definitely. The court gave judicial sanction for blacks to own a slave of their own race. Thus, Kaiser became the first permanent slave, and Johnson the first slave owner of a permanent slave for life. Black on black crime. The other people were indentured and had indentured servitude for a time. This dude making contracts for life. I guess he must have got it from the chief guy who gave his son away for life. After the court saw that, it was over from there. Now they know how to use it. It's a precedent. In this excerpt from a letter to Sir Edwin Sandys, treasurer of the Virginia Company of London, the Jamestown colonist John Rolfe describes events in the Virginia colony. These include the first meeting of the General Assembly, a murder trial, and a controversial involving the Indian language interpreter Captain Henry Spelman. He also notes the arrival of 20 and odd Negroes, the first Africans in Virginia. Not America, but Virginia. So some say that these Africans in Virginia come from Angola. That would make this guy, the Angolan, one of those slaves who came on that ship. He was later freed and then enslaved his own people. So I don't know what people is. Businessman born free in Philadelphia first called for an all in favor of colonization to respond with an aye. Nobody said a word. He then asked for those who opposed colonization to respond with a no. The response was thunderous, unambiguous, to send in for application form to be filled out. Universal Negro Improvement Association. They gave you the address. This is a great thing for those who were Africans and wanted to go back to a strict anti-miscegenation law, and later the Massenburg Bill, which banned racial mixing in all public places. This dude did that. In 1924, Cox formed an unlikely alliance with black nationalist Marcus Garvey, based on their shared belief that the only way to save the racists was for African Americans to what, nigga? Cox retired from the real estate business in 1958 and died in Richmond. Good. In September 1924, Cox entered into an unlikely alliance with Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican-born black nationalist who founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Garvey's black nationalism stood in stark contrast to Cox's racial views, but Garvey's the state legislature on the subject in June 1925, visiting Garvey in Atlanta Penitentiary en route, and in August 1927, Georgia passed its own act to define who are persons of color and who are white persons, and to provide a system of registration and marriage licensing as a means for accomplishing the principal purpose. In 1930, Virginia amended its law to include Native Americans. It was really, but no other southern state seems to have passed similar legislation during the period. A white racist response to black repatriation. Oh my God. Garvey helped in taking away the nationality of the indigenous people of America. All so he can try to make us Africans and get us to move to Africa away from our own motherland. What a disgrace, Garvey. You're a disgrace. Garvey's support for racial integrity legislation apparently did not go unopposed by other blacks, even within his own organization. Goddamn right. His stand on the issue caused a major split among the members of the UNIA's large division in Richmond, Virginia. Of course it did, because it was all Indians, dumbass. Participants in a Richmond UNIA meeting refused to allow Parker, Cox, and Powell to address the body, despite the contrary wishes of the UNIA or William Sherrill. It's a bunch of suckers, man. Watch this right here. Amy Jacques Garvey, Garvey's wife, did eventually meet with Cox, and the two became correspondents and collaborators. In a August 1952 letter to my dear friend, Cox told Jackie Garvey that I remember you well in our meeting in Richmond. Ernest X. Cox to Amy Jacques Garvey, 19th August 1952. In another letter, he told her he hoped that the rumor that Garvey had referred to him as the most beloved of his white friends was true, asking hopefully if Garvey really held him in high esteem. Out of here. In 1947, Cox wrote that he had found some 49 communications from Marcus Garvey and you in his files. He was still corresponding with her at least as late as 1964, 2 years before his death and some 40 years after his initial correspondence with Garvey. Come on, man. Garvey, Jack, y'all some suckers. This is Deuce Muhammad Ali, who Garvey wanted to be like. He had a newspaper article called The African Orient, which he wrote in England, and he would release it in Europe, talking about the situations that was going on where he's from in Egypt. Mainly, I think it was Khartoum. Mainly, like he was from old Egypt before where he was from was Sudan. Got turned into Sudan. And this is him, hugging on his masters. What did it say right there? Embracing the Imam. The same thing that Musa and Tariq had to do. They had to brace Muawiyah, right? Embrace that. And then they got his cousin that came over here, the high Egyptian Mason, Dr. Abdul Hamid Suleiman, who questions legitimacy of Western Shriners. You see, you guys got to put all this together because Marcus Garvey was the forerunner of Noble Drew Ali, according to the Moors. And the forerunner to Marcus Garvey is this guy right here, Deuce Muhammad. And Deuce Muhammad is, of course, Muhammad. He's an Egyptian Mason. He came over to America in 1919 or whatnot. Conscious Mars. Let's go. Check this out. Professor Drew, the Egyptian adept, Newark, New Jersey. Born with divine power, he was taught from the adepts of Egypt. I have the secret of destroying the germs of tuberculosis and cancer of the lungs and intended 30 days of examination and germs and eating cancer, gout, rheumatism, lumbos, heart disease, heart trouble, feminine disease, serious affections to the body, uh, suffering, blah, blah, blah. Although these divine treatments, there has been, and then at the bottom he says, also I have 18 years of Christ's life that is silent name. So when he registered for World War One to go into the service, his register card says who he is, Thomas Drew. And what is his address? 1A1 Warren Street. What is his birthday? January 8th, 1886. Okay, let's go. What did it say? 1A1 Warren Street, Newark, New Jersey. 1A1 Warren Street, Newark, New Jersey. Let's go. Muscles. In 1981, she called and informed Sister Ellis ill to meet me and to go visit the brother. He is very sick because it was as much information that they could from him because he used to work with Drew Ali. He was in the did a lot of stuff. Went to the hospital and visited him. I introduced myself. He remembered me from the ride, and we talked about the illness and what happened. And he was expected. He was expecting his daughter to be coming in from Texas. I soon left, and he had other visitors. The next day, I went back to see him and met his daughter Diana. Shortly, his doctor came in and told his daughter. Um, all tests so far indicated he had cancer. Before leaving, I offered her my service. Today, later, I went back to visit him and found him alone. I asked him the following questions. Brother Walker, Jerry has told me that you know Timothy Drew. He said, yes, but I always called him Drew. He added, we work together and belong to the same secret societies. Masons and Oddfellas. He didn't say secret society, he said society and Oddfellas. The brother asked him, where did you meet Drew? He said, Dixon Barbershop on Warren Street. Brother Walker, I always thought the barbershop was on West Market Street. No, it was located. What did you all do in the barbershop? And the barbershop was the neighborhood social center. We had no place to meet. Most had no money. Okay? So the purpose of this is we just proof it's not me. I'm not saying this. I didn't publish it or write it. I'm just giving you the receipt of what I've been through. Let's go. Ah, this was what Drew Ali was doing in New Jersey. Could bend bars, still sat in jail. Egyptian ADAP student is finally released by Judge Pilgrim, but on bail of $1,700. Dr. Thomas Drew's miracle meaning. Dr. Thomas Drew advertising as an Egyptian ADEPT student who has been performing miracles in his mysterious chamber in his attic. 22nd School Street for several weeks, sat most of this morning in a cell in the 4th Precinct locked up and wondered how he could effect an escape. Of course, he has twisted and broken such bars with one hand and shattered great iron locks and has broken a smile and a muscle twitch, but they were his own bars and locks and handcuffs. The professor was noticeably worried over a bail of $1,700, which had been fixed by Judge Pilgrim to ensure his appearance before the grand jury when he is wanted to answer two charges. One for pretending powers of clairvoyance, um, seduces him of selling medicine without a license. So this dude says he's in there in jail, got arrested, um, walking around acting like he gonna break out of jail and he can bend and has a crystal ball with him and acts like he's gonna do something and do something with the crystal ball while he's in court. Yo, Information gathered by Detective Scoldren Bowman of headquarters showed that the professor medicine and was waging a campaign to obliterate all illnesses from his neighborhood. Okay. He had also given some very remarkable advice regarding prospective marriages, investments, and whatnot. Okay. Attired in a loosely fitting multicolored gown and with a brilliant purple hood covering his Professor Drew, who is an East Indian, with Virginia as his birthplace. Okay. Told of his wonderful second sight powers last night. He advised Schroeder to invest his million as planned and said he would be repaid threefold. Oh God! Now he's telling the detectives to invest in him $1 million and he gonna return it to them. Virginia. With that evidence, the detectives placed the professor under arrest and took him to the fourth precinct with all the paraphernalia and medicine. After being placed in the cell, the prisoner said he was a finished scholar in the art of breaking through the bars and didn't really expect to spend the entire night in the lockup. Now he's threatening him, saying, you lock me up, but I'm gonna be out in a minute. Of course, the professor had a lot of other tricks that he wouldn't do for the lone dollar, but other visitors to the mysterious chamber had seen it all. Wow. Ain't nobody seen nothing in reality, but everybody that's been through this mysterious chamber has seen it all through those. Believe me. And afterward, I saw it all. Yeah, I saw it all right. For instance, when dinner time grew near, the professor enjoyed of if his audience was sporty enough to pay for the iron, then he reported to miraculous powers of healing to make indigestion impossible. Scores of children in the neighborhood, man, this dude right here, this dude, man, would get money from children. Listen, it says scores of children in the neighborhood, it is said, witnessed the nail meals of the professor. This dude would, and if you give him any type of silver, he would eat it. So he would just take it, eat it, probably go home and boo boo it out and take the money about the boo boo. This is disgusting. A silver from the children. So he's taking this crazy. Man. Okay, it says right here the professor hours. The professor worked only several hours each day, the 2 hours preceding soon, and from at night he ate the nails during the twilight hours. Professor Drew said he learned his work in that great country of India and was able to cure aches and consumptions and diasporas and convulsions, lumbago and heart disease, indigestion and neuralgia, um, paralysis, rheumatism, bronchitis, asthma, fits, deafness, and blindness. After making it possible for the local health department to cease business, the professor had contemplated chasing over to London to open the eyes of the blinded soldiers. The hell? Oh yes, so could oh yes, he could do that. He had some wonderful experiences in India among the soldiers. The miracle that the professor performed was the ejections of all evil spirits and influences, thereby making it possible for one to enjoy a night of perfect sleep. What? Man, this is a bunch of jokes. Yo, I apologize for everybody that I even uh, was involved in any of this type of crap right here. Because if my grandma didn't tell me about my family being Indian, I probably would have still been caught up in this crap right here and would not known to look to my genealogy. We can get past all of this. Okay, Thomas Drew. Age 14, January 1886. He was born in 1886, so the first census on him will be in 1900, which this is. And it says he's adopted son, which all Moors know that he was adopted by his uncle. Okay, but it says his father's birthplace is Virginia and his mother's birthplace is Virginia. We all know that he was with his uncle, so they say. But why does his place and birthplace say Virginia? It doesn't say North Carolina, like he teaches to children every Sunday school. Drew, he was a porter. Hey, just like you old Sheik said, he was a porter in Virginia, 1916. All right. Says it right here, almost down by the bottom in the middle. Eli Porter. He lived on 1422 Moore Street. Okay. Thomas True, Virginia. Okay. This is the 1920 now. That's when he was living. You know where he was living at? On that Warren. Dowling. This is where Noble Drew Ali gets his first 19 chapters from in the Moorish Science Temple of America, Holy Quran of the Bible. First 19 chapters come from this guy right here, your colonist. The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, the philosophic and practical basis of the religion of the Aquarian age of the world and of the Church Universal. One was 20 years before the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Unto thee I grant. This is from chapter 20 to chapter 44. American Circle 7. They took it from this right here. From Unto Thee I Grant. So you got two books that Noble Drew Ali, from this book right here and this book right here, and he wrote like 4 chapters of his own self where he made up some stuff, and that's about it. But the majority of the book comes from this. This is all a bunch of ancient Seraphim religious worship, and the other one you coming from Jesus right there. They all come from out of Horus, out of Egypt, and has nothing to do with America. But America has their own. They have their quasi-kodo, so we would have just used our own. Jesus the Christ. The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, the philosophic and practical basis of the religion of the Aquarian age of the world and the Church of the Universal, is a book by Levi H. Dowling. It was first published on December 1st, 1908. Dowling said he had transcribed the text of the book from the Akashic Records, a purported compendium of mystical knowledge supposedly encoded in a non-physical plane of existence. In the later 20th century, it was adopted by New Age spiritualism. Okay, what is Akashic Records? A theosophy, and the Akashic Chronicles is a compendium of all human events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intent ever to have occurred in the past, present, or future. They are believed by theosophists to be encoded in a non-physical plane of existence known as the mental plane. There are anecdotal accounts, but there is no scientific evidence for the existence of the Akashic records. They don't exist anywhere. They're a non-physical plane of existence. They're a mental plane. Basically, in short, the guy made it up. It says it was a theosophy. What is a theosophy? Theosophy is in the late 19th century. It was founded primarily by the Russian immigrant Helena Blavatsky and draws its beliefs predominantly from Blavatsky's writings. Categorized by scholars of religion as both a new religious movement and as part of the occultist stream of Western esotericism. Both older European philosophies such as Neoplatonism and Asian religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism. Listen, what's Platonism? Neoplatonism is a philosophy of Plato and philosophical systems closely derived from it, though contemporary Platonists do not necessarily accept all of his doctrines of Plato. Platonism had a profound affinism, at least affirms the existence which are asserted to exist from both the sensible external world and from the eternal world of consciousness, and is the opposite of nominalism. Nominalism means it don't believe in none of this type of stuff. Basically, you coming to me talking about that goddamn abstract world and what goes on and stuff we can't even see. A compendium is a concise collection of information pertaining to a body of knowledge. So they're making a compendium of of these abstract thoughts and put thoughts, man. It's something that they made up. Thomas Drew, guy, really to mentally ill, but this is the guy who took over, and we see why. He sits in a temple with a bunch of Moors. This is in 1945, and he still got the same fez on. Here at Drew Ali, they have a passenger list of Drew Ali going to Cuba, but they have no passenger list of him going anywhere else in the world. But they sure do have it from everybody else. You can come over in the 1600s, they'll tell you what ship he came on over in. But this guy, they say he's been to Egypt, but we have no records. But we do have this record of him going to Cuba. And on the second line right here, it says Drew Ali. The next line says Charles K. Bay. Stands for Charles Kirkman Bay. M. Bay. Muhammad doing the same thing. Elijah Muhammad follows Far Muhammad. This guy was arrested everywhere. You following a guy who just got mug shots. He's a white Arab and he has mug shots from everywhere. And you following this dude. Look, Arabian Serapism. They worship the one Serapis. Look, FBI files. As a result of recent inspection of the Chicago office, it was suggested that a concerted effort be made to determine the whereabouts of W.D. Fard, reportedly the founder of the Nation of Islam, NOI, according to speeches and writings of Elijah Muhammad, the national leader of the NOI. Allah came to Detroit, Michigan from Mecca in 1930. Allah came in 1930 in the person of W.D. Fard and taught him for 3 years concerning Islam. According to Muhammad, Fard was arrested by the Detroit Police Department in 1933 and shortly thereafter was asked to leave Detroit by the police department. Muhammad that Fard continued to teach Islam in Chicago until 1934, at which time Fard disappeared and nothing about him had been heard since that time. Fard, a lot of people know, was over there in Detroit. In Detroit, that was the Moorish Temple of America, Temple number 4, and that temple was, if I'm not mistaken, was around by Lomax Bay, and then Lomax Bay and them end up calling this temple Allah's Temple of Islam, and that ended up becoming the Nation of Islam's Temple number 1 over in Detroit. And they later moved to Chicago as well and got Masjid Miriam. But the original temple used to be a Moorish Temple of America number 4, and it became their Allah's Temple of Islam number 1. Same sandwich, different sauce. So it happened in 1934, and in 1934, this guy right here, Kirkman, where is he? This guy right here took over the demonstration in 34. So as you can see, it all comes together. Look at this. Even the second one, it says Wallace Ford, Los Angeles Police Department. They got his number, and it says identical to Wally D for Wallace Ford, Detroit Police Department. They got his pictures, and they just say, these guys all over doing the same stuff. So as we can see, as we broke this all the way down from the beginning, man, we don't need none of this type of stuff no more. I'm about to let this go. Y'all know I don't like to be doing and be talking for too long, but I like to give out this lesson. I had to give out this part too. I had to break this stuff down. We had to get on this because we had to get back to this. And remember Toya, Metacon, and King Philip? This is their descendants in the 20th century. Excuse me, in the 19th century. This is Queen Zervia Mitchell. and her daughters Charlotte, and her other daughter Tawalima. They call Melinda. She's an empress, just how you had Emperor uh, Massasoit and Emperor Metacon. She's the empress right now. She was the empress. Okay, ain't no different from their royalty than the other royalties that you see around the world. Okay, let's go. Let's go. Says Zervia Mitchell, she in the house sitting with her daughters. Said they got their basket in the back. We can see that they sees a sister. Make sure y'all go and read this book. Google this book right here, Indian History Biography of Genealogy. Good Sacha Massasoit. The history that she puts in this book is unlike no other history that you ever read in your life. It's jotted down person by person, name, know how one woman can have this much information. So this must means that great information was passed down to our ancestors and they had an impeccable memory. You must read this book. Zervia, my object in bringing this work before the public is not only to show that I am a lineal descendant and the seventh generation from the great and good Massasoit, whom both the red and white men know, venerate, and honor, but also to make record of the wrongs which during all these generations have been endured by my race. Yeah. When the pale face first came to these shores, homeless and helpless outcasts, the cold month of December, Massasoit was king and ruler over a large part of Massachusetts, which Rhode Island and part of Connecticut. When their scanty provisions were gone and they were left and they received timely aid from the noble red man, they would have perished then and there. But what has been the reward to Massasoit and his descendants from the time of the landing of the Puritans down to the present hour? Nothing but deception and neglect. For the past 25 years, I have been seeking redress for the wrongs done to me and mine by petitioning the Massachusetts legislature to remove the state's guardianship from my lands and to pay me for the wood cut there from by their agents, Benjamin F. Winslow of Fall River. Ooh-wee. This is what's supposed to be going on. Not nobody going and begging, talking about we from somewhere else and talking about you from the Bible, this and Bible that. No, 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 no. Give me my ancestors' lineage. Give me my stuff back. That's right here. Massachusetts does not intend to do me justice through its legislator. There seems to be no law for the Indian. Before going to my grave, I have thought it proper to be heard on behalf of my oppressed countrymen, and now, through the medium of the printing press and in the book form, speak to understanding and sense of justice of the reading public. I do not desire to awaken any zeal that is not according to knowledge, and all the facts that are herein presented relating to my ancestry and myself are undeniably true. Imperfect as our description has been, it is all we propose herein to communicate concerning the personal histories of that noble chieftain, the great and good old Massasoit, his greatly abused son Wamsunta, and the grief-stricken, unfortunate Indian queen Weetamoo, her sad fate and mournful end, save as these shall from necessity be referred to incidentally in the biographical sketches of others of their nation, fellow sufferers, and kindred woes. In 1857, Pokanoket Indian Zervia J. Mitchell challenged the Commonwealth to have the guardianship program removed and have 4 lots of land she claimed in Fall River, Watumpa Reservation, and requested payment for the timber removed by the guardian, Benjamin Winslow of the Fall River Indians. Winslow was an opponent that the natives would receive no benefit from the privilege of citizenship. On February 21st, 1917, The Massachusetts General Court passed a resolution granting annuities. Xavier Gold Mitchell's daughters, Tawalima Mitchell, Wutunakanska, Charlotte Mitchell, and Zaria Mitchell Robinson were to receive quarterly installments of $100 on December 1st, 1916 to the aged and needy Indian women of the Pokanoket tribe and residents of Lakeville, Massachusetts until their death. So she got her pay due. She got her pay due. She fought, she got hers. So what I'm trying to say here is we already have our bloodlines. We know who our families are because our families told us. And because we know who our families are, let us get ourselves together. We don't need influence from any place else, from any other continent. Because all we've been doing is feeding these other continents and feeding them and helping them out and helping them come to modernity. All of those places were under uh, uh, banners of kings and queens and emperors. That's how they were ruled. Until they came over here, we showed you democracy. We showed you republic. We showed you humanity and laws. This is the first time the world has truly ever seen humanity and laws since that time Egypt has been destroyed. But when Africa was destroyed, we were still over in America living according to our peaceful laws. So we always, and we taught it to the world to this day, as I proved today. So I'd like to give a shout to Billy Guy of the Pokanoket tribe. Today, he is also